It may have taken a lot of time for those opposed to this war to grow in numbers impossible to ignore. Yet, praise the Lord, they cannot now be disdainfully dismissed as simply unpatriotic. Think about it. Wearying of this war, what has happened finally is that the American people have decided it is far more important to be loving critics of their own country than to be uncritical lovers of its current administration. We have concluded with William Sloane Coffin, it is just as patriotic to keep your country from dying as it is to die for your country.
Now that we have this new Congress, they have a mandate from all of you, from the rest of the people of Connecticut, and from the rest of the American people. And at the top of that list and that mandate is to stop the war in Iraq. Now, Congress has only been in session for 10 days. And in that 10 days, they've done some good things, and we're appreciative of those 10 things. Of those good things. But now, as the 100 hours agenda of Speaker Pelosi and the Democrats comes to a close in another week or so, it is time for Congress to act to stop the war in Iraq. And I want to be clear what I'm talking about. Symbolic acts are not enough. They're important. There are ways that we build public consensus. There are ways that we get out the word to other people, but they are not sufficient. And while it is fine to have the symbolic acts, pass a resolution saying we oppose the escalation, we want a redeployment of the troops home from Iraq, it's not sufficient. Our founders, some here from Connecticut, gave the Congress certain powers. Now, we're not prescriptive about which specific powers they should use. It's not our job to figure that out. It's their job to figure it out. Our job is to tell them what we want, which is an end to the war. And we ask them to use their creativity, their imagination, and figure out how to end the war.
Here's, as they would say in sports analogy, somebody we ought to bring out of retirement for a comeback. I want to introduce to you Representative Irving Stolberg, who's the former Speaker of the Connecticut House of Representatives.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure to look out here
And see Irv Stolberg again.
and John Larson. 20 years ago, we dedicated this building. And in the first day, more people used the building than were able to use the state capitol in the previous year. Looking out here and seeing so many friends, this is really why we built the building, so that friends could gather together and recognize that government belongs to us, not to Bush and Cheney. Don't use up our time with applause. We only have 1 or 2 minutes because we're here for you and we're here for John and Joe and Chris. They don't really need to hear us as much as many of their colleagues do. I want to just say a few words about rule of law. Rule of law. Since leaving the legislature after 22 great years here and helping to build this building, I've been training governments around the world, from Eastern Europe to China, all over the world. And almost everywhere, our embassies have had a rule of law officer. And we have shown the rest of the world that rule of law is important. for civilization. Up until now. Up until now. Today, we are probably the major international lawbreaker in the world.
Yes.
Yeah. This administration will be remembered in 100 years for Abu Ghraib, for Guantanamo, for kidnapping, for torture, for an illegal war, for an occupation that goes on and on, for a president who is disconnected with reality and who the world sees, unfortunately, as an imbecile. And the vice president who comes very close to defining the dictionary definition of fascism.
Yeah.
Right. You guys, let me just say, go up there and represent the people here.
I've been fortunate to be able to travel to the Middle East 3 times with Jack Murtha. Jack Murtha is an American hero. He spoke truth to power. I disagreed with Jack and parted company with him back in 2002. Cast my vote against this war because I thought it was the wrong thing. There are several proposals that are going to be coming before us in Congress. But the first proposal that will come before us will be the one that the President outlined in his speech the other night. His proposal, because he is the Commander-in-Chief, deserves a vote, up or down. I intend to oppose that vote, and I know every Democrat that's standing here will do the same.
You know, it's always important for me to be in rooms with a group of people that's larger than my margin of victory. Barack Obama, when he spoke in Hartford last year, talked about the fact that the 2006 election could really be boiled down to a very simple statement, which is that what was at stake was the power of the gavel. And standing in the House chamber with my 12-year-old daughter on opening day and seeing the gavel being handed from John Boehner to Nancy Pelosi was, I think, the perfect, it was a thing of beauty to watch the change of power that happened. But I think it's important to remember that not only did the gavel change hands in the Speaker's chair, but as John indicated, the gavel changed hands on the Appropriations Committee chair, on the Defense Subcommittee, so that now we have Congressman Jack Murtha, who's going to be the chairman of the committee when the President comes to ask for supplemental appropriations for this escalation. You look at this proposal for the surge or the escalation. The fact of the matter is, as Colin Powell said, there are no troops to add to this escalation that are out there. The only way that you can create those numbers is by extending the deployments of Guard and reservists and active duty troops, which is an outrage. The Minnesota National Guard, who was slated to come home, their unit, within a matter of weeks, just got the news that because of this deployment, they're being extended for another 6 months. And when we look at the question of funding, it is the deployment issue that I think is the weakest part of Bush's proposal and the smartest way to protect the troops and also change this policy. And with your help, keep those calls coming. Don't assume Congress gets it. Those calls should come in incessantly and to everybody over and over and over again until we get this policy changed. Thank you very much.
Let me tell you a quick story from the end of the campaign.
We were reading through the papers one morning, and we had seen an article about Nancy Johnson being up in Torrington, Connecticut, and giving an interview to a Torrington paper. And she said to the paper this, and it pretty much boiled down, I think, what the thoughts of the Republican Party were for the last 45 years of this war. She said, "I don't understand why Chris Murphy keeps on talking about the war in Iraq. He should start talking about things that Congress can actually do something about." And we nearly passed out when we saw it, because doesn't that say everything about the Republican administration and this Republican Congress? That somehow they had deluded themselves into thinking that foreign policy, the conduct of this war or any other conflict around the globe, was somehow out of the control of the Congress. Well, guess what? Starting last Thursday, foreign policy and the conduct of this war is within the jurisdiction of the U.S. Congress. Now, I think it's difficult sometimes to talk about mandates in elections because everybody comes to the polls for different reasons, but you can't be confused about what the mandate was this election. I think we are fulfilling much of our mandate right now as we go forth with this 100 hours agenda, and I am as thrilled as Joe and John and Rosa are to support an increase in the minimum wage, to support a new direction on energy policy, which, by the way, is a national security policy as well. I'm excited about all of that, but let's also be clear that part of that mandate was very clearly to change the direction of this war, not in a couple of years, not in 2 or 3, but to change the direction of this war right now. Right now. I sought out, as my first committee, the Government Oversight and Reform Committee, because I think that the questions that have gone unasked, that have gone unanswered for the past 12 years, in particular for the past 6 years, are going to be answered by this Congress. That is not just questions retroactively about how we got into this war, which I do not think are moot questions. I think that they are incredibly important. But they are also questions about how we go forward, to finally make this administration, to finally make this country realize that might is not always, and in fact in most cases is not, the solution to political quagmires like we find in the Middle East. That if we can, through oversight, through questions asked and answered, prove to the American people once again that talking is not an evil, that good can come from that, and in fact can forestall the situations that we got into today. We can, I think, in the next 2 years, not only put an end to the misery that many of you have been living through and will be part of putting an end to it, but we can set a course forward that may mean that the lessons that we should have learned from Vietnam, that we are unfortunately learning once again on the sands of Iraq, will be lessons that our children, our grandchildren, may actually finally learn something through.
It just didn't happen that these fine congressmen were elected. It was the work of the people in this room and others. We changed the world. We changed the direction of where this country is going to happen. So let's remember all that work we did. We were out in the cold, we changed the world. We're here, we can still change the world. That's what it's all about. And we look forward to working with the congressmen to make sure that work happens. You know, I was thinking of that old song, right? When will they know that too many people have died? Well, you know, the answer is blowing in the wind. It was in the polls. It was at the polls. It's here in this room. We're going to make it happen in the House and in the Senate in Washington.
Let me say, I can't tell whether Chris Healy is still here taking surveillance pictures for the Republican State Central Committee, but let's be clear, you take all the pictures you want, this isn't Jody Rell's inaugural parade. Second of all, I said a week or two ago when I walked out of the Lieutenant Governor's office that I wouldn't be back in this building soon unless it was really important. God, this is really important. You don't have to be a pacifist to know that this war from day one has been a stack of lies upon lies upon lies. Sorry, when George Bush wraps himself in the American flag, all I see are the coffins that I've stood by in this state over too many months of men and women wrapped in the American flag who have died because of this insane war. History will judge this president poorly, but we don't have to wait for history. The voters already did that last fall. They've given us new leaders in Congress who understand the mistake that this was, the lethal, terrible mistake that it was, and continues to be. And there is no reason on the face of the earth to believe anything this says. This is not a surge. This is more of the same. It's more lies, it's more deaths, and it's more failure. We can make a difference. We can stop this increase in the war, number one, and more important, then it's immediately time to bring our men and women home. Thank
you. It's so wonderful to see everyone here today. My name is Peggy Gray, and I'm the mom of an Iraqi vet. Our son spent 8.5 years in the military, and when he was deployed on December of 2004, we did the typical military family things. The yellow ribbons went out, the Blue Star banner went in our windows, we kept in contact with our family resource group, and we joined Military Families Speak Out. Believe that we could support our son and those that were serving with him and oppose the war. We sent weekly packages and letters, and we sent supplies that were needed but were not issued on a regular basis. And as our son's friends and colleagues were killed or injured, we began sending notes of encouragement to recovering soldiers at Walter Reed Hospital. I encourage all of you to do the same. And we continue to support our son today. He came home on Memorial Weekend. He is unable to live on his own at this time, and the VA has just decided that he needs intensive therapy and medications. The elections this past November, and every poll that's out there, sends a message that the majority of Americans oppose the war and the latest surge. The message that my family wants to convey to the congressman here today is best said by Albert Einstein. We cannot simultaneously prepare and prevent war. You, as Democratic leaders in Congress, cannot oppose the war and continue to fund the war. And unless this new Congress acts, the war will continue, and that means each day, on an average, 3 troops will die. And that does not even account for the people of Iraq. In September, Congress approved $70 billion for the war in Iraq. Use the money to ensure that our troops get out of Iraq safely, then pass legislation to provide medical and psychological support for the troops coming home. Families could use a little help also. Fund education and job programs and help them transition from citizen soldiers back to American citizens.